Hey, Billy Ephardt here, and I want to talk to you today in this vlog about what we call the Triple X graph. It was an insight that I had that really I believe God showed me several years ago, and so I just want to explain it to you a little bit in detail. We've covered the 9 steps, what we call getting out of debt or creating a debt snowball, but I want to give you what I call the 30,000 foot view when you're looking at finances. Now, I have some other videos on this so you can hear some other things that I've said, but I just want to explain this. What this really is a graph, and on the left side you have what we're calling monthly income, and on the bottom you have the months and the smaller markings, and the longer one are the years. So down here on the bottom we have 1 to 6 years. Now just remember, this is for illustration purposes. We call it the Triple X graph, and because there's 3 X's that actually end up forming on the graph. As you remember, we're talking about making sense of making money for making a difference, and so that'll mean more to you as we go through this. But let's talk a little bit about where the average person in a Western country is. In most developing nations, most people can't even do the first X because you can't go get a job. But in Western nations, you can actually go get a job. And so the blue little squares here that are on this line, they actually represent your income. If we were to take, and not just people in Western nations, but we were to use the USA as an example, the average household in the USA makes about $4,166, about $4,200 a month. But they're able to spend, that's the blue squares represent your income. The red dots represent your expenses. And so most of the time in the US and or in other Western nations, we can actually spend a little more than we make per month, just simply because of consumer credit. We can go charge something on a credit card and say you make the $4,200 a month. Well, you could go buy something that you can't pay for right now, put it on your credit card, and that means you spend more than you're actually bringing in. You can do that with consumer credit. So this is for illustration purposes, and by the way, this is where a lot of people are. They actually spend a little more than they bring in. Now, there's a couple of things. The first X really begins to form, and don't overly look at the time frames on this graph, because this is for illustration purposes. But if someone takes this debt snowball teaching that we have done, for example, you can start reducing your expenses and bring them down, and your expenses will come down, and then your income typically is pretty level, right? But let's just say that you learn what we're going to talk about in a little bit, that you learn to take value to the marketplace, not just time, and you become more valuable, then you start making more money. Now, I know for those that may be watching this with more of a critical eye, I understand that most people's income is not going to go up like this. I want you to know I know that. But we're just showing you how you can decrease your expenses and increase your income by learning to work harder on yourself than you do on your job. So we say that because the whole idea is you can create this graph and put it on a wall in your home or apartment or wherever you are, and you can literally come and graph what your income is. It may be down here, it may be up here. You can start graphing your income, and every month come up and put where your income and expenses are. You start graphing that, and people that then learn to get out of debt, for example, and learn to take value to the marketplace, they form the first X because they have a lot more income coming in than they do going out. Now, there's some of you watching this right now, you're already there. You're already doing that. But then the next question is, what happens if I have more income here now? This is your excess, so you've got more income than you do outgo. What do you do right here with that income? And we're going to talk about it in more detail a little later, but right now, just let me tell you, this excess income goes down here into assets that you're going to start building. Now, for example, for most of you, it would start with a savings account or some kind of retirement account. But if you really want to get aggressive about building wealth, some of this excess goes in, for example, to putting a down payment on an investment property. And then these lines here that are green represent income that is actually coming off of your investments. And so I just want to show you that. So let me give you, and I'll come back in a later video and cover all of these lines in more detail, but today I want to focus just on this one. And so there's 4 things that we talk about that you and I need to do in order to build the first X. And I'm taking it out of the book Money Mastery. This is a book I wrote several years ago. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it in bookstores. And so step number 1 is on building this first X is become more invaluable, because you take value to the marketplace. I heard Jim Rohn say that many years ago. You don't take time to the marketplace, you take value. And so what you're doing is you're learning to improve yourself. I have a lot of people come to me and say, hey, I have $1,000 to invest. What should I invest in? I always tell them, invest in yourself. Because the better you get, remember, money's attracted, not pursued. So the better you get, then more likely, the more money you'll make. So make sure that you improve yourself and take value to the marketplace. And so as we go through this, then step number 2 here, as you're going through here, is learn to live on 80% of your income. If you want to be real aggressive, learn to live on 70%. One of the best books that's ever been written on that subject is called The Richest Man in Babylon. And in that book, it does a great job of illustrating learning to live on 80% of your income. And so what a lot of people say, well, what do I do if I do that? Well, then what I encourage you to do is if you're learning to live on 80% of your income, then you have 10% that you tithe or give away. And then you have 10% that is invested. And since you're watching, you've gotten this far into the video, I'll give you a nugget. You should have, of that 10% that you're investing, you should take half of it and invest it yourself so that you learn how to invest. And then the other half, turn it over to professional investors, let them put it away for you. So you should do both. Now, some people get real aggressive and they learn to live on 70%. And so you give your top 10%, you tithe or you give away. And then the other 10% that make a total of 30%, those 2, you have 10% you invest yourself and 10% somebody else invests. So the idea is you always want to be investing yourself in something, and I give you several illustrations in the book on that as well, but I'm just wanting to show you the graph. So learn to live on 80%. Then number 3, it's real important, and this is something I've learned in all the years of traveling and speaking. Many people still don't understand the difference between an asset and a liability. Know the difference between an asset and a liability, and the difference is an asset is literally something that will put money into your bank account. Okay, it's like rent coming off a piece of real estate, for example. We call that an asset, because it not only does that piece of real estate typically go up in value, but also it's paying you something. And you want the kind of assets that will go up in value and will pay you something. That's the whole idea behind it. Used to, you couldn't even invest in the stock market like we do today, for example, with paper assets. Back in the old days, when you bought a stock, you literally were buying it because of the dividends of what the stock was going to pay you every year, not for how much the stock went up or down. In this day and age, most people don't even know that. And so the point is, you want an asset that will produce income. That's what you want. An asset means it goes up in value, right? And it produces income. So gold, for example, doesn't do that for you. You have to sell it. So you really want to create an orchard with that you can just go pick the apples off the tree. You don't have to kill the tree to eat. So, and then the last thing, of course, is get out of debt. So we covered step number 4 is to create the debt snowball, which we taught on in another video that you can watch. And so this is the XXX graph. Today in this video, I'm only talking about the first X, and then we'll come back on another video. We'll see you again, and we'll talk about the second X.